Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back. Black.
Good afternoon, folks. How's everybody doing? I will be your moderator this afternoon. So a couple of quick things. For those of you who are on those tweet streets, we're going to use the hashtag Black Movement Matters. So feel free to tweet as much as you would like to so we can get this conversation out into a broader world outside this room. One of the things that the idea of Black Movement Matters really obviously comes out of this moment where we're dealing with Black Lives Matter. And it strikes me that very often when we talk about black bodies, particularly in the United States as context, we're often talking about enslaved bodies, we're often talking about incarcerated bodies, we're often talking about traumatized bodies. We very rarely talk about bodies in pleasure, and we very rarely talk about bodies in movement. And so that's really what I want to talk about, at least start us off this afternoon. And so, Rennie, when I think about the work that you do, and the fact that it's so obviously connected to the movement of black bodies, to movement culture, how do you feel about this moment of Black Lives Matter? Do you think there's some sort of connection being made now between what's happening politically and a return, if you will? Because, you've been doing this since 1992. When you started doing this, cats used to still dance to hip hop up in the clubs. Cats don't dance to hip hop no more. It seems that part of the culture, is not as prominent. There was a time where rappers used to actually dance, and had background dances. We don't see much of that anymore. Do you feel that we're at a moment now where folks are coming back to movement, particularly in terms of hip hop in this moment?
I think I'm on the fence with it. I'm not sure if I feel like people are coming back to movement, but I don't know what type of movement that they're coming back to. You know what I mean? 'Cause I often talk about how we're in the transition period, the same transition period as jazz movement and jazz music was in it at some point, and that we're now. So, for instance, jazz music was something people used to dance to. And as you pointed out, hip-hop music was something people used to dance to. And so we're now sort of mirroring the sort of a cycle, this return to, or evolution, or some sort of evolution or dissipation, sort of dissipating, the culture just kind of like changing and flipping again. So I feel like we're in a major transition, and I'm not sure where we're headed. So for instance, so when we watch hip hop today on television, we see the face of hip hop dance has changed, right? From the 90s, you had, it was mostly black and Latino, male and female, and it was very clear that, and from my experience, there was always male movement and female movement in regards to hip hop. Now everything seems to be androgynous. Many of the women, sometimes in video, you don't know if it's a male or female, unless they're being objectified. And so things have sort of shifted and changed, so I'm not sure if we're returning back or something else is happening, so to speak.
So Tommy, you're curating ideas of dance on various platforms, including institutionally at some place like Duke. We know what that might look like in the context of the dance program. What might that look like in the context of Black studies at this point in time, particularly around those questions of the body and how Black studies thinks about the body and what happens when the body is suddenly in motion?
Yeah, that's pretty terrific. So, when we're taking this rhetoric up about Black Lives Mattering, Black studies and kind of Black people have always been concerned about Black bodies, meaning Black corpses. So we want to kind of make sure that doesn't happen, that when we're talking about bodies, we're talking about corpses. And, Frank Wilderson was here yesterday, and, he's one of the architects of Afro-pessimism. And this is a way to think about there's no sort of liveliness to Black life. But at the same time, dance is about a constant sort of liveliness, and dance really matters because of it. Dance offers us this outside to the everyday. Dance is full of fantasy and desire. So dance does something that everyday life and language can't do. But I do think that in Black Lives Matter movement, there's this need for art practice. Dance is an art. Dance is also kind of a mode of communication and expression, but it's art too. And so when you put those things together, you do get something that's crucial and essential, and it shows us a different kind of way to be in the world. One of the things I did just curate this weekend, I think you were referring to, Mark, was at the Space Jack in Brooklyn, and it was a platform called Afrofuture Queer. And we had a conversation at the end about, trends in dance and dance performance, experimental dance. But there were 2 reps from Black Lives Matter's Philadelphia chapter, and they had come to the conversation because they were trying to imagine a kind of Black Lives Matter's arts wing. And that's why they were there, was to have conversation with younger and older folks who were working in performance and try to imagine together what could that look like in terms of aligning art practices and dance with this very clear social justice movement.
For the 2 young dancers on the panel, who if there's any of us who are probably literally walking the streets, it's probably more likely you as young folks, where the Black Lives Matter moment, matters very particularly to you. How much of the energy that we're seeing in terms of organizing and literally what's happening in the streets, how much of that are you bringing to your practice? Both in the context, obviously, of working in a collaborative space with Pure Movement, but even as you're thinking about your own ideas about movement.
Well, I would say that I carry it with me all the time, pretty much, because just due to where I come from, what I've been through, the expressions that I have to put out to the world. So with the dance, I have to push more. It becomes all one. Like at the end of the day, it's everything that I live, everything that I see, everything I understand that helps me drive within the dance. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a job, it was a hobby. So as it became a profession, I knew I represented something. Mm-hmm. So I had to stay focused to make sure that I am carrying a certain aura within myself to make sure I'm representing me, my family, my friends, my neighborhood in a good light, not just to know what we are, what we about, what we do. I'm from Philly, stuff like that, but just to represent us on a different level, on a different scale, so others could understand. And even amongst my friends, I have to express that to them. So it's an everyday.
Brandyn?
I pretty much feel the same way. I hope y'all can hear me. Pretty much feel the same way as Phil. This is like everyday life. We go through this. We go through a lot of different things, and I think it's like our experiences that help us, kind of be able to go on the right path, like towards we've already been through like some bad situations, and what we used to do before might not work anymore. Now we have to switch it up. It's just, yeah. He pretty much answered a lot of what I had to say. But yeah.
Rennie, for your manager, and folks hear Black dance, and obviously, for many folks, they hear Black dance, immediately they're thinking about Ailey, right? And it's funny because I just recently saw a clip of the Exodus piece that you choreographed for Alvin Ailey, and given all the times that I've seen Ailey, I'm watching this piece, and it's like that's not my mama's Ailey. Right, it clearly was something else, right? So they might think Ailey, they might think Dance Theater of Harlem, which is even more traditional in some ways. When folks come to Rennie Harris Pure Movement and say we want Black dance, what are their expectations, and how have those expectations changed from back in '92 to what the landscape looks like in 2015?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I think. So I'm not sure if their expectations have changed, because I feel like I still, I see the same thing. So when we come to town, we see families come out with their children, and not just like young adults, but their children. So it's kind of like I always say, the circus came to town, so they come to see the hip hop dancers. And then when we're addressing issues like molestation, religion, racism, and then you see all these families get up and leave during the show. So I'm not sure the expectations have changed. Because I feel like as what I would term or call black dance is a community social dances, the dances that come out of the community. I think I feel like we're still in basically in the same situation that we were in, 92, 82, 72. So, and it's hard because we've become elitist about how we receive hip hop dance and culture, black and white folk, right? We're now like, oh no, that's not. We have to see it, jumping over people, flipping over other people's heads, and and I always had a problem with that, based on the idea that throughout the history of black folk in America, when we're talking about black expression, we're always being described as this passionate and energetic and aerobic and all these words that really suggest just sort of this physical feat or phenom, kind of thing. And so when I hear that, it makes me think, well, oh, okay, then that means we're not intelligent. And so I'm interested in, if hip hop or street dancers on a level of 1 to 10, and of course most street dancers want to be on 10. Let's knock it out the box, right? I'm interested in the levels from 1 to 7, right? And so I feel like for Pure Movement, that's really been our mission, to say, no, I'm gonna help you view this a little bit differently, because this is the way I saw it. And many of us see it this way. We make a choice whether we're going to operate within the construct of Western philosophy and theory in regards to the proscenium stage, or we're going to do what we call traditional hip hop, and just do it when we do it, whenever it happens, that kind of thing.
It's interesting because you mentioned street dance, and this is for everybody on the panel. When you say that there are folks committed to street dance, like it almost begs the question: whose streets are we talking about
Right.
at this period of time, right? And I think about that on a couple levels, both obviously in terms of content, but also in terms of institutional support, right? The black arts in this country historically have struggled to find support from black institutions. Two of my favorite people here at Duke, Aaron Greenwald, who's sitting here, and Trevor, over at the National Museum. The beauty of them is that they basically support the black arts here at Duke. From an institutional standpoint at Duke. Very often the streets that black artists have to work are streets that are funded by either large white corporations or educational institutions like Duke. How do you find that balance between the streets that we know resonate, from the kind of streets that some of us came from, versus the streets where we have to survive, in order to be able to do the work effectively?
Well, I think it's I don't know if you're looking for the balance. You're attempting. I don't think it's a conscious thing. I feel like part of it is understanding the dynamic of hip hop culture in general, and those laws of which are the main 3 laws are generally not spoken about, but 3 laws I understand are individuality, creativity, and innovation. And those three words by design suggest progression. And so if that is the foundation of our culture, which it is, I can't wear this hoodie again tomorrow because somebody was like, oh, you had that on yesterday, right? I couldn't go into the cipher and do the same movement twice. Oh, you already did that. You'll hear guys talking. Oh, he did that. All right, no, you repeating, right? And so the whole culture itself, from MCing to graph to dance to DJing, is about progression. Like, you cannot repeat. And so with that said, moving into institutions of higher learning, right? That's a progression. You know what I mean? No matter how much, I had someone say to me, I think it was on an interview yesterday, say, "Oh, you're bringing street dance. How is it bringing street dance to the theater?" I was like, "No. If we were at the cafeteria, I'm still going to do the same thing. Like, it's not going to change. I'm going to do the same piece about molestation. I'm going to do the same, whatever I'm going to do, without the lights, you should be able to feel it, because that's what hip hop or street dance is. And so it's not so much I'm creating this, I'm moving into academia, or I'm moving into the theater and saying we're creating this sort of hierarchy, like making hip hop posh now, right? But rather we're adapting to our environment, and that's what we always do as hip hoppers, is to adapt to your situation. Hip means to be aware. Hippie meaning to reopen your eyes, to be knowledgeable, right? So I'm being aware of my environment all the time, and that's the most important thing. So the balance to me, I think, is really about re-educating ourselves and the masses to say, hey, no, this is the foundation. This is what it means. So we're really not out of context the way that it may seem theoretically. You know what I mean?
Tell me, where do you fit in on this, particularly around the fact that, your challenge, of course, is to keep it hot, whatever it looks like, at least in terms of choreography, but, it's also your job to really intellectualize about this. And what's the difficulty of talking about this sometimes in very staid intellectual spaces? Mm-hmm. I was struck when we co-taught together 2 years ago, you forced the class to have to be in their body. So there were times in the class where we'd go over to Tommy's studio and we had to do movement before class, right? It was all about, you can't teach movement and not actually move. But how do you yourself work the balance in terms of intellectualizing about this, but also still having some integrity around the body and movement?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, so we have such impoverished kind of discourse, and I'll use that word, discourse around dance or creativity, black arts in general, b-girling, b-boying in particular. We just have so little sort of sites of exchange that are translated into language or events like this, but it happens in the dancing. So the thing is, the dance will not be denied. I mean, the dance knows itself, the dance is theory, the dance tells stories about individual expression and sexuality and family life. Like, that's what dance is, that's what it does. And hip hop comes from the people, the dry long so. It's a black and Latino, but it's a black art form that's really concerned with allowing physical arts to flourish. And, emerges right at the moment when the little bit of arts that was available in the New York public school system and then other public school systems around the country were, taken away, under Reagan's neoliberal, that move was the move that actually made the space for hip hop to have to emerge and bring art back into the street where people could have access to it. And hip hop has a lot to say within the forms itself. So the translation into a conversation like this, or a book that I'm working on Black social dance, or a lecture or an essay, that's an act of translation. But what we see in the performance when we attend it is the actual thing itself. And the thing understands itself. It doesn't need us to explain it to itself. It knows what it's doing. But we have to do, what our opportunity is to be in the presence of it. And as Rennie just said, rethink what it is we think we're seeing. Rethink that. Like, oh, I didn't know that that's how men would relate to each other physically on a stage. Or, oh, that move, I could never have thought of that move. And that tells me something I couldn't have known about the possibility of me surviving my day. So dance gives us strategies for survival for the artist and also for the audience.
And then I'm just on that last part, which is just a side note kind of thing, which is interesting. Like in street culture and hip hop culture, many of us were adopted by gangs or thugs in the neighborhoods. You know what I mean? So where they would say, "Hey, oh man, you guys are great. Let's go shopping. We're gonna buy you uniforms." You know what I mean? And you actually become associated with these gangs or thugs in the neighborhood who take care of you, right? Because it's revered. The dance is revered, and those two things kind of go hand in hand. And some of those dancers are of the street life on the other side, but they also dance as well. And so that expression then comes out in the dance itself. So it's not just, so basically it's it's what's going on politically, economically, and socially in that city, that country, globally, the world at the moment, that's affecting the dance physically. So as we all know, if you want to know about the dance, you study what was going on politically, economically, and socially in that era. And then the dance is now the last final confirmation of what is happening, in their space.
Tommy mentioned social dance, and again, kind of putting this on the two young cats on the panel, who I imagine who have been up in the club more recently than the rest of us. I'm just saying. Are young folks still dancing? I mean, that's a very, and I mean, we talked about dancing to hip hop, but, just in general, are they still dancing? Are they up in the club dancing? Do they have house parties where they dance?
I would say.
No, go ahead.
I would say that's a yes and a no. Dance in the club right now is very different than a group of friends getting together in a house party. In the club, everyone's trying to be cute. Everyone's trying to. Girls are gonna have heels on and these tight skirts. There's not too much dancing going on right here. You know what I mean? So, and guys always got the freshest kicks on and everything. The sneaks looking fresh. They're not trying to mess that up. They don't really dance. But you might have those select few in the back, made a corner for themselves, and you might start, getting down with each other. You know what I mean? That's why I say it's a yes and no. Because for the person looking from the outside in, you won't see too much dancing. You just see a lot of people on their phones, or it's like back and forth.
Yeah, like what Brandon said, but I will say that where they are doing a lot of dance in the clubs, and I would say in their homes socially is abroad.
Yeah.
Abroad.
Yeah.
Yes. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
You heard.
Because sometimes I can talk that slang and break it up in this board. Break it into like 8 different languages. But anyway, yeah, that's where they're doing all of everything, like how we did it in the 60s and the 70s and to present. Yeah. And now, and I mean, you have the social dances that come out now, like the nay-nay, the whip, stinky leg, all of these different dances. And, what the young people are not realizing that's walking around in the streets, that you got to put all of these social dances together for this era and this generation, and this is how they become their own freestyle spirits inside. Like what we did with the WAP, the Patty Duke, the Watergate, the Steve Martin, the Cabbage Patch, you know what I mean? Funky Chicken, Funky Robot, all of these different social dances that was out. Electric Slide. People trip on Electric Slide because it's 3 this way, back this way. But let me tell you something. That teaches you coordination. And a lot of times when I go and I teach at these studios, I throw the Electric Slide on, and they say, okay, we're going to pay you, but don't come back. But, no, that never happened. But I mean, I see it in their face, and then they see what I'm going to come up with the following week. But my point is that just from a social dance aspect, a lot of these young people, the generation today, they really don't know what social dance is. They really don't know how to put it together. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They're not putting that exclamation mark, in a sentence. Like with us, when you see Rennie dance, oh man, it's like exclamation mark. It's not period. Yeah, but so they don't really know how to put it together. Do everybody understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah. And let me jump in on that. Like the idea of when I was younger, you could walk up, it was a process, you know what I mean? The young lady's all the way over there. You got to walk all the way over there to ask her to dance. You know what I mean? And and she said no. It's like a long walk back. And you're trying to figure out, what I do after she say no. You know what I mean?
Is there somebody on the side? You can
Yeah,
just turn
right. Yeah,
and go, "Oh, no,
like if there was a bar next, you could easily slide to the bar. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that was, but it was it was all about emotional development. You know what I mean? Developing as a young person to become an older person, and that whole process, I haven't seen the times that I've gone to. I feel like the old dude in the back just sitting there like, what's going on, right? And so most of them think I'm a bouncer, but but like to watch that process now, like it's completely changed, and then also to acknowledge this internet world, this world of the YouTube where the dances are now being just online,
Right.
and there's no interaction. So it's changed. The way that the social how we used to socialize is now changing rapidly. And I'm not sure where that's headed, but I'm just saying, making a statement that it is definitely changing where young people are learning the dances online and having crazy conversations about this stuff and debating online, but no one's really actually like in front of each other.
Right. And that's one thing that I was thinking. Now they're more socially disconnected. Like the connection within dance, communication, and development is really off. Like when we were teens, the things that we had to go through to understand the dance, just to understand where these dance moves are coming from, why these people that we never seen before come to a different place and do something totally different. Why is it different? Where did it come from? And what makes them do it like that? You had to go through a whole process that was more than just personal. It was worldly. So even going through these different connections, even going through the different connections between relations, you're going through different connections between places. So it's way bigger than just the dance. That's why it's kind of falling off into the dance, into the music, into the relations with the people. It's way bigger than the dance.
And the other part to that is that, just to expound on it a little bit more, like, so the idea, like, when we were on tour, we would go, like, this is 83, 84, when I was dancing commercially for rappers. Go on tour, you go to the hotel. In the hotel, so somebody in the hotel who works in the hotel is from the neighborhood. Where's the club?
Right.
What's the dance here?
Right.
Where did this dance come from? You ask that question. Oh, okay. And then when we would go out and when we perform on stage, we would add the local dance to our thing, and they would go off because they knew that, how do you know this? You're not from here. You know what I mean? And that would just add a little plus to our show. You know what I mean? But you would hang out and like, wow, and you start to feel the vibe of what was going on socially in that. Like, so Atlanta, when the first time I learned the prep, actually I learned it from Jermaine Dupri when he was like 10 years old. So he taught me the prep. It's like, oh, this is the prep, man. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And we go to the club and everyone's doing this thing here with their neck, And we're like, yo, what the heck is this? This is crazy. And then after watching it, at first it feels foreign, but then what I often say in classroom, like, this is the wrong place for me to teach you this dance, right? Because you're not surrounded by the energy and the synergy of the music and the other people. You know what I mean? So, like, if you're standing next to someone who can't dance, you're just going to prolong yourself from never learning to dance because that person can't dance either. You know what I mean? Like, it's vibe. You're picking up on their vibe. Like, at the club, if you can't dance at the club and you go to the club, you keep going every weekend, you'll be dancing soon because that vibe is around you.
That's real. That
That music is around you and everyone's on the same rhythm and they're on the same frequency, so to speak. And so it's harder to sort of teach that idea of in the classroom, how to learn this dance. I just lost my train of thought. All right. So anyway,
So you mentioned, the dances that are on YouTube now. And by the way, the WAP was the last social dance that I learned, and that was 20 years ago. 30 years ago, excuse me.
I taught that today actually in class. The little girls was looking like, what is that? It's the WAP. And you smack it up.
LL's I'm Bad came on the radio one day two kids in the back, my wife and I in the front. It came on, and we just started instinctively doing the head thing. And they just looked at us like, what the hell are you doing? But you mentioned the YouTube piece, right? And I remember the early days of Soul Train, those first couple of years before Don Cornelius hired professional dancers. When it was still just cats and kids in the neighborhood, one of the things he did that was brilliant about the show is that he highlighted all of these social dances. So you go back and you watch those first two seasons, and they're all doing these kind of distinctive, it's not unified in any kind of way. Now we got kids, of course, who can go to YouTube, right, who can go into the archive, pull all kinds of things out. Miley Cyrus can become the queen of twerking in this context. So we have a whole nother conversation now about cultural appropriation. Do you worry about some of this being lost, right? Particularly because we're not seeing it being taught back to young black folks in ways that will allow it to be able to be sustained.
I think that's my biggest problem or issue. It's okay that it's now evolved into this whole other thing. I was saying to interview yesterday. I was with my ex-girlfriend and we were going. I was at a dollar store, and they had this section for dancers or something like gear or whatever. And
In the dollar store.
in the dollar store, yeah. And so, and of course, I'm wrong. I don't like to shop. I guess I don't know if it's a man thing, but it's just like I'm like, are you kidding me? So I'm going around like my third time around the dollar store, and she's loving it. I look over and I'm like, oh, I'm looking and I saw it's a white woman on a package in pink tutu, with the ballet, with point shoes, the bun, the whole nine, and she's doing her thing like this, heads a palmade, like that whole So I'm looking and I look at on top of the package, it says in bold black, hip hop tights. What? I was ready to call the manager. It was like when the first time someone was selling a cheesesteak outside of Philadelphia, I had to talk to the manager like, this is not a cheesesteak. So I was like really upset, and it just said, and I bought them. I didn't try them on. I just let you know, because I wanted to show my students. I said, this is now what I call cultural theft. Right, appropriation and cultural theft are like they go hand in hand, but this is different, right? This is a corporation right now. This is somebody I'm gonna stamp in hip hop and they will come, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what's not being passed down is the history of the guys who started this stuff, and 90% of them are still alive. A lot of them like just getting into like mid 60s now. Right, these guys are still around. You can talk to them online
Without adequate health care.
Right? Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. And so at the end of the day, we're missing that history, and then we're not having that other history connected. So we're not talking about that the jazz. We're not talking about Al Minns and Shorty Snowden and Norma Miller, Frankie Manning. Well, we're talking about them in regards to. Lindy Hop, but that transition from that, because Lindy Hop was the culmination of all those jazz dances, right? That transition into what we now call hip hop, and when you look at those things, you see the same movement. So even with the WAP, you're looking at the peck, right? When they used to do this, right, slightly, or it's slightly off a little bit based on the generation, but we don't get that history, and no one's teaching them that history. When I ask them, I say, who's Samuel Solomon? No one knows who Samuel Solomon is. Or Don Campbell, or Emilio Austin, any of these guys who pioneered the movement that they're actually doing. And now the last part to it is, and now what they've done was actually taken the jazz, which they've already appropriated and changed it and add ballet foundation to, right? Taking the ballet foundation out of jazz and added the gestures and antics of rappers. So for instance, when you see hip hop today, hip hop dancers, quote unquote, they're doing all this stuff like this, and they're doing this while they're grabbing their crotch, doing this with their lips. And hip hop dancers don't do any of those things. the reason why we're busy doing the Dougie. When do you have time to grab your crotch while you're doing, like, you know what I mean? Like, we're doing a nay-nay. When do you have time to do any of those sort of antics? Those are gestures of rappers. So that's where the swag, this whole swag thing, they add on to what they now calling hip-hop, which is really jazz and just gestures from rappers. Has nothing to do with hip-hop culture. Because even the music that they're dancing to is not hip-hop. You know, it's a hybrid version of R&B and hip hop mixed into some pop, you know, for the most part. So when I tell them that, of course, this rocks their world because I've been doing hip hop all my life, you know. I'm like, okay, right, you know what I mean? But the idea of bringing them back to the foundation, which is the internal rhythm that is present. This is hip hop right here. This is it. Maybe make a little face. You know what I mean? Tongue out. Right? What people don't understand, right, exactly. What people don't understand is hip hop, that in hip hop culture, we acknowledge it, we acknowledge the light and the dark. Right? We're not just like, oh, it's celebration and we're throwing out. It is celebratory art form that came out of this idea of like we're alive, we're great, everything's great. But it's always acknowledgement of both. Right? So you see the face is scrunched up like, that's that blues, right? That's like, you know, people are going through things and they're doing what they do, right? And so there's always an acknowledgement of both. And so what's happening now is they sort of shifted this whole thing. Now it's energetic and acrobatic again, and it's all sexualized and, you know, totally morphed into some other stuff to make money. All right, so at the end of the day, I ask my students to research everything that I said, and ask them not to believe anything I'm telling them, like I'm gonna ask you not to believe anything I'm telling you right now. Do your research, and it's already there. It's already there written before I was even born. You'll see the history of street dance come through into what now we call hip hop.
So I'm gonna go down the line before I open this up to the audience. So you got 4 minutes to present your opening and closing statement on movement. What's the song you're picking?
Well, mine probably be a party song because
What party song?
you want
We need some specificity.
Well, it's called Horns. It's called Horns. It's by DJ RL. It's a club mix. Like these are like songs that you never heard a day in your life. Like nobody outside of where I be at will hear this because it's like these are under the underground mixes.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it had to be that track because party music is really exclusive to my area. I love it. I dance to it all the time, and at the same time, it could explain so much. It could explain so much. So yeah, y'all can look it up. It's called Horns, DJ RL.
Mine would be It Takes Two. Rob Basie.
Rob Basie, Easy Run.
Mm-hmm.
Mine would be System of a Down, Chop Suey.
Ooh.
Everybody like it.
I
don't like his.
Right now. I think I keep falling back into that hijack. You know, just me. There was a night we were hanging out. It was just on my head, and I couldn't let go of it.
Herbie Man.
Your love.
Oh, yeah.
Well, see, I got some love. All right. Hijack.
See, I showed you love on your song. Nobody showed me love on
I
mine.
know. That's true, actually.
You know what I'm saying? Remember when they was coming down Harlem on a joint, passing the Apollo Theater? I was like, I'm going to be on that thing one day. Like, come on, man. You can't front on Rob Basie. They had them tight Adidas sweatsuits on. Come on, man.
Mine would be George Clinton, Not Just Knee Deep.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay, all right. I don't like that one.
That's
but
like
yeah.
that's 15 minutes. That song's 15 minutes long, so I got a little bit longer.
Black lights and booze